All right, let's get straight into our first debate now. Should we send fewer criminals to prison? 0207 862 2222 is the number now. The Justice Secretary is warning that even under the government's plans to create more prison places, they could still run out of spaces over the next few years. Shabana Mahmood says that building alone is not enough to deal with the lack of space. Do we need to be sending fewer people to prison? Could we be looking at different things like tagging offenders instead, or handing out maybe community sentences? Let us know your thoughts on this. I'm going to start with you, Cristo, because actually you've had quite an eventful morning, even just coming into the studio.
I have actually, yes, because I apprehended what looked like there was a crime in progress on my way to the studio. You very kindly sent a taxi for me this morning, and I was just getting in it, and the driver said to me, "You see them over there, that couple, they look like they're stealing parcels off people's doorsteps."
Oh, no.
And one of them, the guy involved, had opened up a parcel with these shirts in and taken them all out and sort of decided he didn't want them strewn them all over the road, and then carried on walking. And so I said, right, follow them. And so we followed them, and then I took some photos, and by this point they were on a different road.
Your very own Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, Cagney and Lacey, I think. I don't know which one I am.
Whichever one you
I want to be
pick.
Cagney, but I think I'm Lacey. And I could be Ether, thank you. And then called 111 and told, or 101, sorry, and told them, and they caught them.
So the police actually came?
The police came, they rang me and said, "We've got them. Have you got the photo of the person?" And I sent them the photo. And this was unbelievable to me. It was broad daylight they were doing this and taking these parcels. And unfortunately, they weren't carrying all the evidence. And so the police said, "Look, we've given them a very stern talking to. It's clear what they were doing, but we've given them a stern talking to, but there's nothing really that we can do." So, to the point here, there's clearly not enough deterrent here that people are feeling so brazen about doing this openly in daytime. Now, I think there's two reasons for that. Firstly, the police are not around. There isn't a police presence. There isn't the people around to actually stop them.
Except the police did come. I'm very impressed that the police came.
But secondly, there isn't the deterrent, i.e. a punishment. And whilst I see the logic of certain crimes needing perhaps more community involvement, my fear is that because we don't send people as a short, sharp shock to prison with their maybe first or second offence, when it would really mean something, when it would scare them, when it would actually say, "You know what, I don't want to be here anymore, maybe I need to go on a different path." The problem is we send people to prison after they've committed their fifth or sixth offence, do you know what I mean? And then by then, it's almost meaningless. And I just wonder whether
Are you thinking shorter sentences but more sharp shots?
Yes. If you are literally your first sentence and you are of an age where it would mean something, put them in a youth detention for a week, put them in prison for a week.
OK, and there could be an argument to this, because one of the arguments to why we have such an overcrowding issue in our prisons is not that we are putting more people into prison, although we are as populations grow, but we are putting them into prison for longer, and it's not working.
Well, that's one of the reasons why, obviously, the Labour government earlier this year let out a number of offenders who were at the very end of their sentences, because, as Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, has said, we are running out of space. That is an inalienable fact. I think in 18 months' time, the projection is going to be 89,800 prisoners, but we only have spaces for 88,400, so we're going to have a shortfall of 1,500 space to prisoners within 18 months. And the projection sort of longer, 5 years, 10 years, just gets a lot worse. We're sending more people to prison and there isn't enough spaces. Labour are going to build 4 new prisons, but even that, the Justice Secretary says, isn't going to be enough. So I totally hear what you say, Cristo, but prison is not working. And I think we have to look, I beat this drum all the time, but you have to look at the whole kind of, the picture in the round about societal problems. Probably, in the excellent example you just gave, Cristo, and I'm really glad that they were apprehended, those people, we don't know that, what they might have come out of jail yesterday. They might be on drugs. They might be desperate. We don't know what the position is. But certainly locking people up, throwing away the key for longer isn't working. And so I think that perhaps perhaps, as you said earlier, Storm, you suggested is a solution, tagging people more, doing it more in the community. I think we need more societal intervention in terms of drug rehabilitation. And, you know, one solution, actually, I thought when Cristo was talking, maybe, I mean, it's not too absurd, but, you know, don't send those guys to prison. Get one of those police officers, get 5 of those people who were nicking stuff off the streets and go around making sure that other people aren't nicking stuff off the streets.
Why don't you send them to Buckingham Palace so they could have a nice
suggestion.
Cup of tea and a biscuit? Why don't you send them there? Don't you think that they need some like tougher punishments early on rather than sort of this softly sort of community approach?
I don't think...
That's also not working. We do that now. As Storm was saying, that we tag people, we give them community service. They're talking about upping that when that is not working either. I take your point about drug resources and that being a part of this, and the police officers in this case did suspect that might have been a motive in what I witnessed this morning. But the softly approach isn't working. The long-term prison approach isn't working. We need more officers, we need more deterrent, and we need a shorter, sharper shock by getting people inside quicker.
I think you need everything, really, don't you? I think you need everything because what works for some people doesn't work for others.
Well, but what you're suggesting is we're taking things by a case-by-case basis, and I suspect that would take a lot more resources than what we're doing at the moment, and whether we have the funding for that, I don't know. Denise from Hull, you're up first. What's your view on this?
If people have done the time, they have to do the crime. If they do the crime, they have to do the time.
Got you.
But if we've got people abroad, pinching or whatever, and go to jail, fetch them home to their own country.
Well,
and people who's come from... Pardon?
That is one approach, and actually I think Labour are looking very closely at that. I don't think it would be the silver bullet to giving us the space that we need in our prison service, particularly as the need will get bigger and bigger over time. But when you say if you've done the crime, you should serve the time, that is the question though, Denise. How long should these crimes... should you get in prison for some of these crimes? There's an argument to say we're sending people to prison for far too long.
Yeah, well, if while they're in prison, make it shorter, but give them a trade while they're in there to come out and do.
Well, that would be sort of doing the best of both worlds from our panellists' argument, is that there would be a bit of rehabilitation in there, but they would still get the short, sharp shock. I'm not sure, though, if you are struggling on the outside world to get a job and you have no positive outlook for your future, so you commit a crime, if going into prison to then be given a trade seems like that bad an approach to life, at that point it may start to appeal. You know, if I go into prison, I'll definitely get an apprenticeship, whereas out here it's too hard to get one.
Oh, I don't know. Quite a lot of people have got them outside. But like I said earlier, if foreigners have done crime in our country, send them back to their own countries and you'd get quite a few small spaces.
Yeah.
But we need something to free the prisons up.
Yes, we do. And maybe the short, sharp shock is the way to do it, and a bit of rehabilitation at the same time. Denise, thank you very much for your call. Cyrus, what's your view? Cyrus calling from London.
Hello, good morning. Hi. I couldn't agree with your last caller more. Basically, I absolutely think that you've got to have some kind of training for these people. A very quick example is that I knew a guy who was actually inside for 8 years. Now, when he came out, they gave him £80 and they gave him a night in a hotel. Now, he's absolutely nothing in the prison except more crime. He's lost his partner. And like I say, he's come out with £80. He's living on the streets. What's he do? He goes back to crime. It's basically, what a waste of time when you could have trained these people up. You know, if you've done the crime, then you do the time. But in the meanwhile, do something constructive.
Well,
One more quick point, if I may. Sorry, yes, go on.
I suppose another argument against that is that's all very well and good for the criminal, and it may stop reoffending rates. But what about the victims in all of these crimes? Would it not upset you a little bit to know if you've been attacked on the street, you've been mugged, something really violent has happened to you, that actually what that individual got was free food and board and an education that person that got mugged would have had to have paid for?
Right, but maybe the reason they did that in the first place is because they didn't have it. They had. Well, everyone's got a choice. But the point is, what I'm saying is, they were educated. If you did have some qualification, you wouldn't go down that road. You wouldn't go down that avenue.
And I do understand the logic. I think the point that I'm making to you is, are we forgetting the victims in all of this?
No. Well, I didn't. You know what? To be honest with you, I didn't actually think of that department. You're right. But the point is, if it's already done, what can you do? But the point is, what you can do is make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, that is the follow-on argument to that, isn't it? That actually, it may be hard to stomach as the victim of a crime, but as a victim of a crime, I'm sure the one thing you don't want is anyone else to face the same trials that you've had to. Cyrus, thank you very much for your call. Brenda from Wiltshire, what's your view when it comes to prisons? How do we stop the overcrowding? Because building more prisons is not going to be the answer either.
Well, what I was ringing about was to bring the point. They're saying the prisons are full to capacity. Well, I know of 2 prisons that stand empty. One is Dartmoor Prison, which is a massive prison. They took the prisoners out of there because they said there was radon in the prison cells. And I was born and bred on Dartmoor, so I've lived with radon, which is on the land. It's never done me any harm. And that yet somebody higher up has decided to remove all the prisoners, which have lived there since the war. That's how long it's been going. And Shepton Mallet Prison is empty. You can book in there for a tour. Well, what are they doing, showing people a tour when they could put criminals in there?
Brenda, you may have a very good point here. I actually don't know the science or engineering behind that or why it was shut down, but it was obviously condemned for safety concerns on that. But I mean, are there other spaces we could use rather than build prisons? Are there other spaces that we could use to house prisoners?
The government, as it stands, and I think this was put in motion by the last government, but they're talking about these prisons and the extra capacity being available by 2031. So that's 6 years from now, nearly 7 years from now. For goodness sake. Why? It's not going to take 7 years to build a prison. I know exactly what will happen. We'll talk about it. We'll find a site. People will object to the site. We'll find another site. They'll object to that one. We'll go round and round in circles, which is what we do in this country.
Well, they're trying to change the legislation now, aren't they, to give it a different classification so that there isn't too much of that going round in circles.
We have to, if we need, the problem with this country and so many of the problems that we have, prisons being one, many others, come from our lack of infrastructure. And this is a prime example of that.
It is confusing though why they take so long to build them. I know there'll be lots of red tape that they have to get round and there'll be lots of planning involved. But when COVID hit, we got those Nightingale hospitals, albeit we didn't use them, Emily, but we got them up pretty quickly.
Yeah, we did. But then, you didn't have to keep the people inside the hospitals because the poor people who were inside them were incapacitated and weren't in any position to move.
But lower level people in something similar and then keep the.
But that's community. But then that's what I was saying earlier. That's kind of like tagging, isn't it, for very low level crime? I mean, all crime is abhorrent, obviously, because particularly when it's to do with people, if it's mugging, even which is considered low level, it's all horrible. As your point earlier, Storm, about remembering the victims. But I think when you look at kind of makeshift pit prisons, in effect, like the Bibby Stockholm, there were so many problems with that it had to be shut down in the end because so even when, and UK government, whether it's Labour or Tory or Lib Dem, whatever the colour of the government, when they try and put pro tem short-term solutions in, they don't work. However, whether it be prison ships or barges or the Bibby Stockholm or, porter cabins, you have to have properly protected and built prisons. Dartmoor, by the way, I thought was actually being refurbished, but I will stand corrected by Brenda from Wiltshire. But and so I think Cyrus and our previous caller as well said that. Yes, was like you have to give a leg up. Probably I'm paraphrasing a Tory government here, but an old Tory government. You have to give a leg up, not a handout. So you do have to train people, and we surely have to be able to give in, and that costs a lot of money, right? If you're putting people in prison but giving them training, you have to be able to try and stop them returning to crime because that's a problem.
Tony from Surrey, what's your view when it comes to prisons?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily the state that we don't have enough prisons, although clearly we do need more. I think the problem is in the sentencing.
Okay.
Because when you catch someone, whether it's for a mugging or burglary or whatever it is, you give them a sentence and shall we say it's 1 month in prison, they know then if they go to prison, they'll be out in a couple of weeks. But what I think they should do is to say, right, do away with that system, give them a month in prison, but if they then reoffend, your next sentence is automatically doubled.
Well,
and
Tony,
again
I mean...
and again, they will soon get fed up with getting bigger sentences, and that should make them think again before they break into people's houses.
You would hope so, Tony, but I think the problem that we are having at the moment is not just more people going to prison, but people going to prison for longer, and actually that would probably...
Well, yes, but think about it long term. If you find someone who's broken into your house and he has been given 3 months imprisonment, if he does it again, he's going to get 6 months. That is going to stop him from doing it, because if he gets caught...
Tony, I think the problem is prison isn't stopping
then there
people.
won't be so many people in prison.
Reoffending rates are so high, it proves that prison isn't stopping people.
Yeah, but that's because the sentences aren't there.
OK, Tony, thank you very much for your call. Trevor from Cheshire, what's your view?
Yes, my view is this, that when I was 18, 70 years ago, we were called up to go in the army for 2 years. Instead of sending these youths to prison, put them in the army for 5 years.
Trevor, do you think the soldiers? Do you think our soldiers will be happy with that? These are trained professional individuals that are there to serve the country. Do you think they'll be happy to take on convicted criminals?
The trouble is today, love, there's no discipline at all. There's no discipline in the school.
Well, there could be a slightly different approach where you don't send them into the army, because the army are an industry, they're doing their own thing. You could send them into a sort of national service that could be affiliated with the army, where they had the same sort of training and the same sort of routine and discipline. And Trevor, maybe that has a part to play. But also, there's an argument to say we go even further back and we start with education and make sure every single person leaving our schools is able to read and write. Because when you look at the levels of literacy in prisons, they are woefully low. So that might be another good place to start, but discipline might be another area. Trevor, thank you very much for your call. Now, later, should